Is
So
that true?
a little bit on parks, because I don't know if you're aware that when they play, the little kids play soccer here, and so in the first weekend that they had soccer games, they didn't mow the fields. So we had little kids running around out here. These fields are full of potholes. They're full of little holes that the city hasn't done anything to level, and yet we've got our little kids out here running around in grass that's high, so they can't even see the holes. So we got kids falling, twisting their ankles and things like this, and kids are getting hurt. So these are things, while people are saying we need to build new, I'm saying we just need to take care of the stuff we have, right? We can't just focus on always building new stuff. We ought to also focus on taking care of the things we have. You can look at the ground here, all the stickers and cockaburs. Well, you got little kids playing soccer, and they're always getting stickers. My little daughter plays soccer here. Always has stickers in her cleats, always has stickers in her socks, and always complaining about it. There's things we can do to prevent that. We can spray the fields. That doesn't mean we got to spray every park in the city, but the ones that we know are going to get used for things like this, we should be taking care of them and should be doing those. We should be leveling these fields out and making sure that when kids come out here to play, it's safe for them to play on. Because if not, then we're going to have kids getting injured, and that's, yes, MSA is the one running the soccer league, but it's at a city field. They're using a city field. The city should be taking care of it.
And do you feel that way? I mean, maybe not only about parks, but like any other infrastructure, like within the city, or mostly just parks?
That goes, unfortunately, that goes across the infrastructure of our city. When we look at projects throughout our city, we often see that projects are, not being focused on, not being taken care of, not being prioritized, not being run efficiently and effectively. As a project manager, as a PMP certified project manager, one of the things I focus on day to day is how to make things more efficient, how to make things run smoother. And if we can make things run smoother, we can reduce the cost. There's a lot of extra cost when you start getting into these inefficiencies, when you start doing all these extra things or not finishing a project the way it's supposed to be done. So when we look at road construction, when we look at sewer and water projects, when we look at the generators outside our fire departments that were installed but were never hooked up to the buildings. So for 2 years we've had generators sitting outside the fire departments. They look nice, but they're ineffective because they don't work if they're not hooked up to the building. So when our city is looking at how we spend money, we have to make sure we spend the money efficiently and effectively. We have to make sure that our taxpayers' money is being used in a wise way and providing value back to our taxpayer.
And what are some top 3 things that you think the city could fix? I mean, you kind of mentioned some. I didn't know if you have any other.
So the city needs to focus first and foremost on its foundation, right? We have spent 20 years now not prioritizing the foundation of our city and trying to build a roof on sand. When we talk scripturally, Christ told us, do not build your house upon the sand, build your house upon the rock. And that is true when you build anything, whether you're building a house, whether you're building a city, whether you're building a piece of software, you have to start at the foundation, at the base. And unfortunately, when we look at our sewer, we look at our roads, and we look at our water systems, they're starting to fail. They're starting to degrade. And that's because our city has not made prioritization of those systems. We have prioritized everything else in the city. We've looked to spend money at the airport. We've looked to spend money at all these other things, but we haven't spent money on the things that we need to spend money on. They passed a $100 million road bond that was supposed to go to fixing our infrastructure. Over the time of that $100 million road bond, our infrastructure got worse, not better. So while we gave them additional money, the city council did not prioritize our infrastructure as much as they asked us to. And they asked us to foot the bill while they took that money and shifted it to other projects. The city council needs to commit to these projects just as much as they're asking the people of Midland to do. So if we're going to ask the people of Midland to add additional tax revenue, add additional tax debt to their bill, we as a city need to match that commitment by taking our money and our budget and prioritizing the things we're asking our voters to prioritize. And that means fixing our roads, fixing our water, and fixing our sewer so that in 50 years, our city is still running and still great so that when our kids and our grandkids are growing up here, they have a great place to live.
And what do you think sets you apart, from your competitor or, you know, anybody on city council?
So I think what sets me apart from what we have on city council now is willingness to try new ideas, willingness to innovate. We've seen a city council that's been fairly stagnant for the last 2 decades, that just keeps trying the same thing over and over again and hoping that it'll magically start working. You know, Einstein said the definition of insanity is to try the same thing over and over and over again and hope to get a different result. It's time that we start bringing in new ideas, new innovation, new people who are willing to try different things. We've seen other cities throughout our state and throughout our country try new and innovative things that have led to lower costs and better results. So we can't just sit here and keep barking up the same tree because it worked back in the 1980s or it worked back in the 1970s. We don't live in those times anymore. We have to recognize that times have changed, that production processes have changed, that quality of life initiatives have changed, and that people want to come to this city. They want to have a great city to live in. They don't just want to come here to work anymore. They want to come here and they want to raise their families. They want to grow their families, and they want to build, and they want to have that opportunity to succeed. And we need to make sure we're focusing on giving the citizens that, and we make sure we're listening to our citizens, not just listening to our big business partners, but also listening to everybody and making sure that every voice is heard, so that when we talk about how our city is being built, that it's being built the way our citizens want it to be built. Not just people from outside of town, not just people who want to bring money here, but also people who live here and want to build here.
And I mean, Midland has grown a lot.
Right.
In the last, I think it was like 24% since in the last 10 years, which is way more than a lot of other places in Texas. So what do you think are some ideas of how we should, you know, go about like helping it grow and continuing it to grow?
So one of the ways we help it grow is by lowering our property taxes. When we look at the communities outside of us, when we look at the communities around us, we talk about Lubbock, Abilene, San Angelo, these areas have lower property tax bills than we do. They have higher property tax rates, but because their valuations are so much lower, they have lower property taxes overall. There's, you know, we often hear people talk about the property tax rate, but that's not the only portion of the property tax bill. Your valuation also goes into the fact. So over the last 5 years, valuations in the city of Midland have risen by 29%. So that's what our people are paying. They're paying that valuation times that property tax rate. So we have to recognize that there's a lot of different things and a lot of different factors here that are going to go into how people decide where they're going to live and whether they're going to create a business here. So when we talk about new business, we need to start empowering the people of our city to create new business. Instead of relying on the city council, instead of relying on the Midland Development Corporation, we need to allow the people of our city to be much more involved, much more empowered in deciding how our city moves forward when it comes to building new businesses. Maybe that's oil and gas businesses, maybe it's not. Maybe it's businesses outside of oil and gas. And all of those should be accepted and should be allowed to thrive in our city in the free market. And how we do that is we help them by lowering their property tax bill. We help them by giving them some extra financial incentives to build in our city. We often hear all too often about people saying, oh, well, Lubbock just got this new thing, and Odessa just got this new thing, and Abilene just got this new thing. Why aren't we getting that in Midland? Well, the reason we're not getting it in Midland is because our costs are higher. We not only have higher property taxes, we have higher wages. And because of that, people are going to say, well, if I'm going to build a new business and I'm looking at 100,000 possible customers, I'm going to go to Odessa, I'm going to go to Lubbock, I'm going to go to Abilene, where those factors are more competitive. Where we are losing is on those factors. So we have to empower our citizens to be more involved in how the city's built. And that means, you know, if people want daycare centers, being able to open daycare centers, being able to, you know, start a local daycare center, being able to run it and not having to worry about their property tax valuations in the first couple years going through the roof and causing them to go bankrupt. We know that local businesses, small businesses, often fail in the first 5 years, and it's usually because of financial burden. And usually that financial burden is because of some unexpected bill. And the easiest way to get an unexpected bill is all of a sudden your taxes go through the roof and you weren't expecting it. So you budgeted for everything else, you're operating on these very slim, very tight margins, and now all of a sudden the city comes to you and says, hey, your property tax bill from last year has now doubled or tripled, and you now need to cough that money up. So we need to make sure that we're prioritizing allowing our people to be able to create new business, allowing them to take part in the market, lowering the barriers to entry so that each and every individual in the city who wants to recognize their entrepreneurial dream can do so. This city was built on entrepreneurship. It was built on people taking risks, taking chances, and succeeding through hard work and perseverance. But we can't get away from that. We have to continue to empower and to make that and to further develop that spirit. So our equal application of policing bill initiative, what we want to do is we want to help good cops. We want to make sure our great cops in this city are taken care of. And part of helping great cops is getting rid of bad cops. We have to recognize that bad cops hurt good cops and that bad cops are the overwhelming minority of the police in our world. When we talk about the Midland Police Department, we don't often see major issues, but that doesn't mean that cops aren't overstepping their bounds or impeding their rights. Lately with the COVID pandemic, we've seen California, we've seen New York, we've seen Washington, we've seen Australia utilize their police forces to restrict the rights of their public. We have to make sure that our public rights, our individual rights are protected. And we have to make sure that our police officers who are doing the best of their job and the best of their ability are able to continue to do so. When I was in the service, when I served in the Army for 10 years, I can tell you that when we would get a video, a YouTube video of some soldier doing something stupid, it would make us and make our jobs harder. Because now we have to try to explain why these people are the outliers and not the usual. When we look at the news, we often see the one bad that gets magnified, and everybody thinks that that's the entirety. What we have to recognize is that bad police are often the 0.01% of our police force, but we have to be willing to get rid of those police officers to help our good police officers. We have to be able to hold bad police officers accountable for their actions so that good police officers can gain public trust and have an easier time doing their day-to-day job. We don't want the people of our city to think that their police officers are here to harm them or think that their police officers are here to hurt them. We want the people of our city to respect and be happy to have their police officers around them. And in doing so, what we must do is make sure that police officers who are overstepping the boundaries of what our community finds acceptable are held accountable for their actions. And we need to make sure that that discipline is transparent to the city and make sure that the people of the city know that if a cop has made a mistake, whether it be a big mistake or a small mistake, that that cop has been held accountable, that that cop has been given some level of discipline, and that the people of the city know that. So what we want to do, in conjunction with talking with the police department, is create a task force, create a group that would overview discipline of police officers. So we're talking about officers, law enforcement people that from outside of our city, that don't know the officers inside of our city, that would come into our city, that would look at a case on a blind review, and would decide whether or not what the discipline for that officer should be.